Joy and sorrow in life are a balancing act. Um, Members being eulogized today are Howard Snyder. Doug Canning is going to eulogize him. Clair Cox being presented by John Wei from Michigan. Ed McGuire, presented by Jerry Blaivas. And finally, Bill DeWolf by Paul Lange.
Howard Snyder was a patriot, a surgeon, a teacher, and a scholar, and a family man who gave us as generously at home as he did at work. In June 2020, we lost a friend. Howard was born on August 25th, 1943 in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. To understand Howard, you need to know a little bit about his family. Howard's father and grandfather were decorated U.S. Army generals who collectively fought in 5 wars. In 1916, Howard's grandfather first deployed as a young Army physician. Soon afterward, World War I broke out, and Howard's grandfather was rapidly promoted to colonel, and then in the Second World War to Major General. By the end of World War II, Howard's grandfather was responsible for all U.S. military hospitals throughout the world. Howard's grandfather wrote a blistering account of what he believed were poorly funded military hospitals that angered General Eisenhower. Eisenhower demanded to see Howard Snyder Sr. They became fast friends. Howard's grandfather stayed on as personal physician to the general and then to President Eisenhower. He remained close to the Eisenhower family until the president's death in 1969. This picture was only one of a few portraits painted by our 34th president of his friend Howard's grandfather. Howard's father was a tank officer when he met Luanne McLaughlin, Howard's mother, while assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia. Like Howard's grandfather, his father was rapidly promoted through World War II to Brigadier General by 1949. After the war, Howard had advantages that few boys enjoy. As son of a general officer and the grandson of the White House physician, Howard lived a privileged life. When the family moved to Washington in 1953, Howard spent Saturdays at the White House pool. He had bounced the ball with British Prime Minister Anthony Eden and was one of only a few US citizens who has seen a president naked. Growing up as he did on army bases across the country, Howie, as he was then known, got to ride on the back of Sherman tanks. He hunted quail in Texas stream beds and fished wherever he went. This photo was taken just 2 or 3 years before Howie entered the St. Andrews School. Howie loved St. Andrews and excelled. Here he is at graduation day, when he graduated #1 in his class in 1961. He easily gained admission to Princeton, where he earned a varsity letter in shooting and raced sailboats with a world champion skipper. It was around that time that he began to introduce himself more frequently as Howard. Howard's sophomore year at Princeton brought up a major event that shaped his life. En route to a hospital mission in Ecuador, as his plane circled across the Andes, one engine failed and the plane crashed. The crew was killed upon impact. All passengers but Howard were unconscious. Howard made his way out of the plane, then re-entered it over and over to drag each passenger out and laid them on the jungle floor to recover. His mentor and trip leader died from head injuries. All the others survived and followed Howard to a nearby village where they were rescued. Howard thought that that was one of the reasons that he was accepted to Harvard Medical School. In Boston, Howard's surgical training was like few others. His residency in general and thoracic surgery under Dr. Francis Moore, his pediatric surgery residency under Dr. Robert Gross, Dr. Hardy Hendren, his urologic training under Dr. Ben Gittes and Dr. Alan Reddick was rich with volume and diversity of caseload. When Howard decided he wanted to pursue pediatric urology, he traveled to England to spend time with Sir David Innes Williams at Great Ormond Street and with J. Herbert Johnston at the Alder Hey. After Howard finished at Great Ormond Street, in 1980, he migrated to CHOP at the behest of C. Everett Koop and John Duckett, where he became half of one of the great collaborations in modern pediatric urology, and where he would spend the next 33 years. Howard's time at CHOP resulted in 375 publications in all areas of pediatric urology. At CHOP, Howard helped launch the career of 120 residents in general urology, 36 North American and 12 foreign fellows, and many junior staff, of which I count myself. Howard influenced our thinking in areas as diverse as the care of children with posterior urethral valves, prune belly syndrome, hypospadias, cryptorchidism, neuropathic bladder, and pediatric urologic cancer. He led nearly all of our national and local medical societies. He served on the American Board of Urology as a member and as an examiner, and served as a member of the Board of Regents at the American College of Surgeons. He was proud of his membership within the GU surgeons, and he counted many of you as close friends. Howard's early life, constantly exposed to real-life heroes, taught him courage and a zeal for excellence that was his trademark. Howard once said, and I quote, "You don't grow timid of power when you've seen a president naked." He has taken his lineage, part healer and part warrior, to many venues, from the operating room and clinics at CHOP to numerous lecture halls like this one, where we have heard his commentary, which was steeped in data, careful thinking, enormous clinical experience, and strong personal conviction. As a surgeon, he was meticulous. He selected each instrument and placed each suture to save time without sacrificing accuracy. As an advocate for whomever or whatever he believed in, he was relentless. As a teacher, he was a friend and a demanding mentor who knew how to inspire his students to get more out of themselves than even they knew possible. In the operating room, he broke the most complex surgery into hundreds of steps. He was legendary for his ability to teach throughout an 8-hour case, seemingly without ever stopping to breathe. Howard traveled to more than 140 invited lectureships and 42 visiting professorships in 19 countries on 5 continents. In 2002, he was awarded the St. Paul's Medal, an award only occasionally presented by the British Association of Urologic Surgeons to a non-British colleague for contributions to British urology. Howard's friendship with surgical leaders throughout North America and worldwide made CHOP an interesting place to work. He was proud of his friends that he made along the way. Many of you are here today. The Howard Snyder Chair at CHOP was funded by many of Howard's grateful patients and helps fund the care of children who have been reconstructed and now require transition to an adult practice. At a meeting 10 years ago when he endowed the chair, more than 150 of Howard's colleagues, former fellows, and patients came to honor him from 23 countries and 6 continents. Some of you were there that day. The Pediatric Urology Medal, awarded by the American Association of Pediatrics Section in Urology, is the highest award bestowed upon a member. This medal is awarded to only a few individuals who have made outstanding contributions to our subspecialty. In 1984, Dr. Harry Spence was the first recipient. In the decades since, a host of other innovators, mentors, clinicians, researchers, teachers, and authors and leaders have been so recognized by their peers. In 2013, Howard was the 29th recipient. But Howard was most proud of his family. Mimi and Howard were married for 46 years. During that time, Mimi applied her skills as a research-trained chemist and a Wharton MBA to enrich their community and Howard's family life. Mimi, who survives Howard, is known for her Le Cordon Bleu cooking, her gardening and painting, and her unending support for Howard, their daughter Emily, their sons Curtis and Jonathan, her son-in-law Rick, daughters-in-law Nicole and Anne-Marie, and their 10 grandchildren. Many years ago, I asked Howard to name 3 things for which he's most proud. He said his family, his military heritage, and his commitment to service. Service to his country, to his family, to his church, and to his countless numbers of trainees. And I think that is all of us. We are all lucky to have known him. Howard, congratulations on an astounding life, and thank you for your wisdom, your commitment, your loyalty, your courage, and your grace. We all miss you.
I am presenting this eulogy in place of Dr. David Bloom, who cannot make this meeting and sends his regrets. Dr. Clair Edward Cox II was born in 1933 in Illinois during the midst of the Great Depression. While he was still an infant, his family moved to Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where he attended high school and excelled in academics and sports. Not surprisingly, Dr. Cox attended the University of Michigan as an undergrad, as well as for medical school, graduating in 1958. While he was in medical school, he met and ultimately married Clarice Adele Wicks. She was a nursing student at the time. The two of them started a family and had 4 sons and eventually 11 grandchildren. Over the course of his long and illustrious career, Dr. Cox's wife, Clarice, was always on board and always by his side. As a medical student, the young Dr. Cox was exposed to urology at the University of Michigan. Among those who mentored him at the time included Reed Nesbitt, Russell Scott, Norman Hodgson, Ralph Straffen, Bruce Stewart, Ian Thompson, and Bill Lakey. Following medical school, Dr. Cox decided to pursue cardiothoracic surgery, so he moved to University of Colorado for his internship. Perhaps like some of us here in the audience, he noticed that the cardiothoracic trainees and faculty were glum compared to the urology team. He also noticed that the cardiothoracic patients did not do as well as urology patients. These observations no doubt contributed to his decision to switch to urology. After his internship, he moved to UCSF for his urology training. While there, he was mentored by Dr. Frank Hinman Jr. Among his earliest papers there was one entitled Incidence of Bacteriuria with Indwelling Catheter in Normal Bladders, published in JAMA 1961, no less. In reviewing his long list of publications, he had interests in voiding physiology, bladder defense mechanisms, and oncology. After his residency, he took a faculty position at Bowman Gray, Wake Forest, where he rose to the ranks and ultimately was appointed professor. Dr. Cox was then recruited to the University of Tennessee as chair of urology in 1972, and this is where he spent the final 3 decades of his career. After arriving in Tennessee, he was elected to GU Surgeons in 1973, the same year as William Brannan and Norm Hodgson. During his career, Dr. Cox trained 90 urologists. He co-authored many papers, including a few with fellow GU surgeons, Drs. Hinman, Dr. Strock, and Dr. Rowan. Dr. Cox stepped down as chairman in 1999 and then retired in 2009. After retiring, he spent time with his family, grandchildren, and enjoyed taking in nature on his farm. Dr. Clair Edward Cox passed away at home on July 9, 2020 in Memphis, Tennessee, surrounded by his family. He is survived by his wife Clarice and 4 sons and his grandchildren. Let us now bow our heads as we pay homage and respects to Dr. Clair Cox with a moment of silence.
Let me tell you about Ed McGuire, my cherished friend and colleague. Look deeply into his eyes and see his gentle smile and see what I see, a genuinely good, kind, and humble human being, a caring and loving husband, father and grandfather, a doctor, a friend, a mentor to hundreds, and an inspiration to thousands of urologists and gynecologists, and of course to his patients who revered him. He was a soldier who served his country with honor, dignity, and distinction. Ed was born and raised in East Lansing, Michigan on February 11th, 1940, the second of the 7 children born to Helen and Tom McGuire. He passed away peacefully at his home in Florida on February 16th, 2021, at the age of 81 years. He graduated from Loyola University and then Wayne State Medical School with high distinction in 1965. He completed a surgical internship at the University of Rochester Strong Memorial Hospital and was drafted into the United States Army in 1966. Those 13 months left an indelible impression upon Ed. He witnessed the horrors of war firsthand, serving as a U.S. Army battalion surgeon and earning 3 Bronze Stars and the Army Commendation Medal for heroism and valor. Look again at his face. This combat hero was hardly more than a teenager. To his dying days, Ed was plagued with disturbing memories and nightmares of that terrible time. On one occasion, he took me to the memorial for his Army unit, not far from the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. He recounted with a sobering sadness some of his most harrowing experiences, but concluded with fond memories of each fallen comrade as he read aloud their names inscribed upon the memorial plaque. Returning to civilian life, Ed found a world turned upside down, but he forged ahead, undaunted, to become an iconic figure in urology. He was the recipient of the most prestigious awards from both the American Urologic Association and the Society for Urology and Female Urology, and was honored as one of the 4 founders of the new subspecialty of female pelvic medicine and reconstructive urology. As a physician scientist, Ed was a unique, intuitive, and innovative thinker. Profound thoughts seemed to percolate in his brain and spout forth as fully formed concepts. He was able to see through the morass of confounding observations and data that obfuscate the underlying principles of the science of urology. These underlying principles are meant not only for the ivory tower of academic medicine, they are the engines that drive the way we actually treat patients. Ed was a passionate outdoorsman and cherished his time hunting and fishing with his friends. In 2005, Ed's world finally turned right side up when he married his beloved Susan, affectionately known as the Boss. Ed retired in 2017 and spent his remaining years in the blissful company of his extended family. I am a part of all that I have met, said the immortalized hero Ulysses in Tennyson's poem of the same name. And like Ulysses, Ed McGuire is a hero, a Bronze Star recipient 3 times over. I am saddened that I can no longer see Ed's face to face and that I can't belly laugh at as he recounts his experiences in the vernacular of his subject or bear witness to the horrors of the war that he endured firsthand. But like Ulysses, Ed is part of all that he has met. Not a month goes by that I don't remind students, urologists, friends, and families about so many of his contributions, his wisdom, and most of all, his character. In that sense, too, Ed McGuire is immortalized. I am blessed to have known him and grateful for his enduring presence.
William Charles DeWolf passed away this year at the age of 78. He was born and educated in Chicago. While in medical school at Northwestern, he married Jan, the love of his life, for over 55 years. He spent 3 years at Northwestern training in general surgery, and then, inspired by Lowell King, spent 4 more years in a combined general surgery urology residency at the University of Minnesota under Elwyn Fraley, becoming board eligible in both fields. These specialized training programs were then notoriously typical of Elwyn Fraley, ABU consternations notwithstanding. To a greater or lesser extent, such tailored training was enacted by many of the other so-called Minnesota boys who achieved academic distinction, including, in order, Ricardo Gonzalez, Bill, myself, Dick Williams, Arthur Smith, Ralph Clayman, and others. Bill then entered the laboratory full-time, doing immunology research first in Minnesota for 2 years, and then at Harvard for 3 years, after which he resumed clinical activity in Harvard's Beth Israel program, but continued research half or full-time, giving him more than 6 years of full-time laboratory research. To sustain that research passion financially, he endured time away from his other great passion, his family, Jan, the children David, Stephen, and Julia, and moonlighted every other weekend in New Hampshire for 8 years. He became officially the head of Boston's BI urology program in 1988 and held that leadership role with great distinction for over 35 years. Like all the Minnesota boys, he drank the Kool-Aid distributed there, namely that one could, with an indefatigable work ethic, be an outstanding clinician and surgeon, and also a successful surgeon scientist. While Lady Luck may have shined on some of us more, Bill was the truest surgeon scientist of the Minnesota gang. He had a functioning lab for decades where, with his unsurpassed organized work ethic, he not only faithfully administered, but also regularly worked at the bench. He was awarded federal funding for 30 years. But Bill truly also was a great clinician and surgeon, often in ways that are hard to describe, but easy to recognize when you see it. His accomplishments during his 35 reigns as chief are well documented in his 40-page CV, including research articles in prestigious journals like Nature. A Harvard chair is named in his honor, and soon there will be a yearly DeWolf lectureship. That's all fine, but wait, that's not the Bill we should remember. One could recall his remarkable self-control, equanimity, willpower, and perseverance that I first saw on the wards when he was my chief resident, and our family became close and remained close. And others saw it more poignantly later in many ways, including after the tragic death of his eldest son, David, after getting and beating B-cell lymphoma, and 7 years later, when he courageously addressed and fought off pancreas cancer for 4.5 years. We could recall his more humane attributes and activities, his dry humor, his philosophical aphorisms, his curious love affair with cars, especially his 3 Corvettes, his season tickets and passionate following of the Boston Patriots, Celtics, and Red Sox, the remarkable and many foreign travels he and Jen took, and mostly his delight in his grandchildren. But that's not the Bill I want to convey here, and neither do many others who knew him well and said so at his passing. I will quote only one here from Mark Litwin, who called Bill his yoga and said, quote, "Bill was all the good parts of an old-fashioned surgeon and none of the hubris. He mentored dozens of trainees and young academics over the years, and each one would attest to the value of his unflagging support, warmth, cheerleading, philosophical aphorisms, and constant love. His earnest smile and can-do attitude were ever present. Bill was a man of ingenuity, integrity, and parsimony." To me, Bill, the Bill that I want to leave with you, which is best portrayed in this classic painting, The Doctor. When I look at it, I usually think of Bill with emotions that are difficult to describe, but include medicine as a life, not a job, idealism in the face of adversity, compassion and empathy intermingled with professionalism, curiosity and perseverance, and humility. Let me end with a further comment. Thanks probably to my theological father, I sustained, like my great friend, Paul Schoenhammer, a passion for the interface between science and religion. So it's strange that I never really discussed this with Bill. However, at the funeral, I heard that in his last days, Bill was looking forward to seeing his deceased son, David, again. So I assume he had, at a minimum, had decided that the universe was purposeful and headed towards some meaningful end rather than to a fatuous fate. But either way, I think we can conclude, as I once did in my dad's eulogy, with the classic biblical approbation that we all ultimately covet. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. I'm sorry that we can't stand together, but in respect, please be silently mindful, maybe prayerful for the next 10 seconds. Thank you.